Margaret Thompson stood outside the tall iron gates of Buckingham Palace, clutching her worn leather notebook against her chest. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard as she watched the final preparations for what would become the most important exhibition of her career. As the newly appointed curator for the royal collection, Margaret had spent the last 6 months planning every detail of the Coronation Anniversary exhibition. Today marked exactly 60 years since Queen Elizabeth II had been crowned, and the palace was preparing to open its doors to show treasures that had been hidden away for decades. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she walked through the palace corridors. The weight of responsibility felt enormous. She had been chosen from hundreds of applicants to organize this special exhibition, and she knew that millions of people around the world would be watching. The Queen herself had personally approved every item that would be displayed. The first challenge had come 3 months earlier when Margaret discovered that several coronation items were missing from the royal inventory. The St. Edward's crown, used only for coronations, was safely stored in the Tower of London. But smaller items, gloves, jewelry, and personal mementos from that historic day in 1953 seemed to have vanished into the vast storage rooms beneath the palace. Margaret had spent weeks searching through dusty boxes and forgotten chambers. The palace staff, initially helpful, had grown tired of her constant questions. Some older servants remembered the coronation day clearly, but their memories often conflicted with the official records. One particular morning, while examining storage room number 47, Margaret found something unexpected. Hidden behind a stack of portrait paintings was a small wooden chest. Inside, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, she discovered a pair of white silk gloves. A handwritten note tucked beneath them read, "Her Majesty's spare gloves, Coronation Day, June 2nd, 1953. The discovery sent excitement through the exhibition team. These gloves had never been cataloged or displayed publicly. Margaret carefully photographed them and sent the images to the Queen's private secretary. Within hours, she received permission to include them as the centerpiece of the exhibition. As Margaret arranged the display cases in the palace's picture gallery, she thought about the young woman who had worn these gloves 60 years ago. Princess Elizabeth had been only 27 when she became queen, younger than Margaret was now. The responsibility of ruling an empire must have felt overwhelming. The exhibition would tell the story of that extraordinary day through personal objects and photographs. Visitors would see the Queen's coronation dress, designed by Norman Hartnell and embroidered with symbols from across the Commonwealth. They would learn about the 8,000 guests who crowded into Westminster Abbey and the 27 million people who watched on television. Margaret had interviewed several people who had been present at the coronation. Lady Patricia Williams, now in her 80s, had been one of the Queen's maids of honor. She remembered the weight of the velvet robes and the sound of trumpets echoing through the abbey. Her stories brought the historical event to life in ways that photographs could not. The most challenging part of organizing the exhibition had been deciding which stories to tell. The coronation lasted several hours, but Margaret had limited space to display items. She chose to focus on 3 key moments: the Queen's arrival at Westminster Abbey, the moment the crown was placed on her head, and her appearance on the palace balcony afterward. Each section of the exhibition would transport visitors to a different part of that day. Margaret had worked with lighting specialists to recreate the atmosphere inside Westminster Abbey. Recordings of the coronation ceremony would play softly as people walked through the displays. The Queen's coronation dress remained the most spectacular item in the exhibition. Made of white silk satin, it was embroidered with golden thread depicting roses for England, thistles for Scotland, leeks for Wales, and shamrocks for Ireland. The Commonwealth countries were represented by their national flowers: proteas from South Africa, wattle from Australia, and maple leaves from Canada. Margaret had spent hours studying every detail of the dress through magnifying glasses. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Each flower had been hand-sewn by a team of 12 embroiderers working for months. The dress weighed nearly 11 pounds due to all the decorative elements. Working late into the evening, Margaret arranged the final display case. Inside, she placed the newly discovered gloves alongside a photograph of the young queen, putting them on in preparation for the ceremony. The image, taken by the royal photographer, captured a moment of quiet concentration before the most important day of Elizabeth's life. The palace staff had initially been skeptical of Margaret's youth and inexperience. At 32, she was the youngest curator the royal collection had ever employed. Some questioned whether she understood the significance of the items she was handling. But her passion for the project and attention to detail had gradually won them over. Security preparations for the exhibition had been intense. Each item was fitted with sensors that would trigger alarms if touched. Guards would be stationed throughout the gallery, and visitors would pass through metal detectors before entering. The insurance value of the displayed items exceeded £50 million. Margaret's assistant, James Crawford, had been invaluable during the preparation months. A recent graduate from Oxford with a degree in art history, James brought fresh perspectives to the project. He had suggested including interactive elements that would engage younger visitors, such as audio recordings and touchscreen displays showing historical footage. The exhibition would open to the public in 3 days, but tomorrow would bring the most important visitors of all. The Queen had requested a private viewing before the official opening. Margaret would personally guide Her Majesty through the displays, explaining the stories behind each item. As Margaret locked the gallery doors for the night, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The exhibition represented the culmination of months of research, planning, and careful arrangement. Tomorrow would determine whether her vision had successfully captured the magic and significance of that historic day 60 years ago. The palace corridors were quiet as Margaret made her way to the main entrance. Security guards nodded respectfully as she passed. Outside, London bustled with its usual evening activity, but inside these walls, history felt alive and present. Margaret thought about her grandmother, who had been among the millions watching the coronation on television in 1953. She had often told stories about gathering with neighbors to watch the ceremony on one of the few television sets in their neighborhood. Those memories had inspired Margaret's love of history and ultimately led her to this moment. The weight of preserving and presenting royal history felt both thrilling and daunting. Each item in the exhibition carried stories of a nation's transformation and a young woman's journey to becoming one of the world's most respected monarchs. As Margaret walked home through the London streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change everything. The Queen's reaction to the exhibition would determine not only its success, but potentially the future of Margaret's career. The responsibility of honoring 60 years of dedicated service felt enormous, but she was ready to meet the challenge. The morning of the Queen's private viewing arrived with London wrapped in a gentle spring mist. Margaret had barely slept, running through her presentation countless times in her mind. She arrived at the palace 2 hours early, checking every display case and ensuring that each lighting fixture cast the perfect glow over the coronation treasures. James met her in the picture gallery, carrying 2 steaming cups of tea. His usually cheerful demeanor seemed subdued by the importance of the day ahead. Together, they made final adjustments to the audio equipment and confirmed that all the interactive displays were functioning perfectly. At exactly 10 o'clock, the gallery doors opened. The Queen entered accompanied by her private secretary and 2 ladies-in-waiting. Margaret felt her heart racing as she curtsied and began the guided tour she had rehearsed so many times. Her Majesty moved slowly through the first display case, studying the coronation invitation that had been sent to world leaders in 1953. The invitation, printed on handmade paper with gold lettering, represented months of diplomatic protocol and careful guest list preparation. Margaret explained how over 2,000 invitations have been sent worldwide, making the coronation the largest gathering of royalty and dignitaries in British history. The Queen paused at a photograph showing her grandmother, Queen Mary, examining the St. Edward's crown days before the ceremony. Her Majesty shared a memory that Margaret had never read in any official record. Queen Mary had been concerned about the crown's weight and had insisted that the young Princess Elizabeth practice wearing it for extended periods. Moving to the centerpiece display, Margaret presented the newly discovered gloves with obvious pride. The Queen examined them carefully, a slight smile crossing her face. She revealed that she had been terrified of losing her gloves during the ceremony, as removing them would have been required for the anointing with holy oil. These spare gloves had provided essential peace of mind on that nervous morning. The coronation dress drew the longest examination. The Queen stood silently before it for several minutes, perhaps remembering the weight of the fabric and the significance of each embroidered symbol. She pointed out details that even Margaret had missed: tiny seed pearls sewn among the gold thread, and subtle variations in the stitching that marked different embroiderers' work. Margaret had arranged for a special surprise in the next section. Hidden speakers began playing the actual audio recording from Westminster Abbey on June 2, 1953. The sound of the Archbishop of Canterbury's voice filled the gallery as he performed the ancient coronation ritual. The Queen listened intently, her expression unreadable. When the recording reached the moment of crowning, Margaret watched the Queen's face carefully. 60 years had passed since that transformative instant when a young woman became a monarch, accepting responsibilities that would define the rest of her life. The weight of history seemed to fill the room. The Queen's reaction to the exhibition exceeded Margaret's hopes. Her Majesty asked detailed questions about each item's discovery and preservation. She corrected minor historical details in some of the display texts and provided personal insights that would enrich future exhibitions. One display case contained sheet music from the coronation ceremony, including the specially commissioned anthem, Zadok the Priest by Handel. The Queen mentioned that the music had been so overwhelming that she had struggled to concentrate on the Archbishop's words. The combination of trumpets, choir, and organ had created an almost supernatural atmosphere inside the abbey. Margaret had included a section devoted to the Commonwealth aspect of the coronation. Representatives from across the British Empire had traveled to London for the ceremony, many wearing traditional dress that had never been seen in Westminster Abbey before. The Queen studied photographs of these dignitaries with particular interest, remembering conversations and diplomatic challenges from that complex period. The most emotional moment came when the Queen reached a display of children's artwork created for the coronation celebration. Schools across Britain had organized art competitions, and winners had been invited to present their work at the palace. Margaret had located several original pieces from 1953, showing the young Queen as imagined by her youngest subjects. One crayon drawing depicted the Queen as a fairy tale princess, complete with an enormous crown and a dress covered in stars. The child artist, now a grandmother herself, had written, "Our beautiful Queen," in shaky letters across the bottom. The Queen studied this drawing longer than any other item in the exhibition. James had prepared a special multimedia presentation showing television footage from Coronation Day. The Queen watched scenes of crowds lining the streets of London, children waving flags, and families gathered around television sets in homes across the nation. She commented on how strange it felt to see herself as that young woman, bearing such enormous responsibility with apparent calm. The exhibition's final section focused on the balcony appearance after the ceremony. Margaret had recreated the famous balcony using projection mapping, allowing visitors to experience the view that the royal family had of the massive crowds below. The Queen stood in this simulated space, perhaps remembering the weight of expectation and celebration that had surrounded that historic moment. As the tour concluded, the Queen offered suggestions for improving certain displays and praised Margaret's attention to historical accuracy. Her Majesty's approval felt like the greatest achievement of Margaret's professional life. The months of research and careful preparation had successfully honored the significance of that historic day. The Queen's ladies-in-waiting took photographs of Her Majesty viewing various displays. These images would later be released to the media, generating international interest in the exhibition before its public opening. Margaret realized that the success of this private viewing had transformed her project from a palace exhibition into a global celebration of royal history. After the Queen's departure, Margaret felt simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. The validation from Her Majesty herself provided confidence that the exhibition would resonate with public visitors. James immediately began implementing the Queen's suggested improvements, working to perfect every detail before the public opening in 2 days. The afternoon brought a stream of final preparations. Security teams conducted their final sweeps, testing every alarm system and camera angle. The gift shop staff arranged special commemorative items created exclusively for the exhibition. Tour guides received their final briefings on historical facts and visitor management procedures. Margaret spent the evening reviewing media plans with the palace press office. International television crews had requested filming permits, and newspapers from around the world planned special coverage of the exhibition opening. The global interest confirmed that the coronation's 60th anniversary held significance far beyond British borders. The discovery of the spare gloves had generated particular media excitement. Fashion historians and royal watchers praised Margaret's detective work in uncovering this previously unknown piece of coronation history. The gloves would likely become the exhibition's most photographed and discussed item. As Margaret prepared to leave the palace, she received a handwritten note from the Queen's private secretary. Her Majesty had expressed her sincere appreciation for the exhibition's historical accuracy and emotional resonance. The note concluded with an invitation for Margaret to present future exhibitions to the royal family, effectively establishing her reputation as a trusted keeper of royal history. Walking home through London's evening streets, Margaret reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been an unknown museum curator hoping for an opportunity to work with significant historical artifacts. Now, she had the Queen's personal endorsement and international recognition for her expertise in royal history. The exhibition would open to the public in 48 hours, but Margaret already knew it would be a success. The Queen's enthusiastic reception had validated every decision and detail. Tomorrow would bring final preparations and media previews, setting the stage for what promised to be the most visited royal exhibition in recent memory. Opening day arrived with London buzzing with excitement that Margaret had never experienced in her career. Crowds began gathering outside Buckingham Palace before dawn, despite the fact that public access wouldn't begin until 10 o'clock. Television crews from around the world set up their equipment along the palace gates, preparing to broadcast live coverage of the exhibition's debut. Margaret arrived at 7 in the morning to find chaos that both thrilled and terrified her. The palace staff was implementing security procedures that resembled preparations for a state visit. Metal detectors had been installed at every entrance, and additional guards were stationed throughout the building. The exhibition had attracted far more attention than anyone had anticipated. The media preview began at 8:30, bringing together journalists, photographers, and television correspondents from 5 continents. Margaret found herself thrust into the spotlight as the exhibition's creator and primary spokesperson. Camera crews followed her through each display, recording her explanations of historical significance and discovery stories. The BBC's royal correspondent, Sarah Mitchell, conducted the first live television interview. Standing before the coronation dress display, Margaret explained how months of research had revealed previously unknown details about the ceremony's preparation. Her passion for the historical accuracy and emotional resonance of the exhibition came through clearly on camera. International media showed particular interest in the newly discovered gloves. A reporter from American television asked Margaret to describe the moment of finding them in the forgotten storage room. As she recounted the discovery, Margaret realized that this story had captured public imagination in ways she never expected. The gloves represented the human side of royal pageantry, showing that even queens worried about practical details. James proved invaluable during the media sessions, managing logistics while Margaret focused on interviews. He had prepared detailed fact sheets for journalists and coordinated with photographers to ensure that every significant item received proper documentation. His background in art history helped him answer technical questions about preservation and display methods. The exhibition's interactive elements drew considerable attention from technology reporters. Touchscreen displays allowed visitors to explore high-resolution images of the coronation dress embroidery and listen to audio commentaries from people who had attended the ceremony. Margaret had insisted that technology enhance rather than overshadow the historical artifacts. One particularly moving moment came when Lady Patricia Williams, now 85, visited during the media preview. As one of the Queen's former maids of honor, she provided first-hand accounts of Coronation Day that brought the exhibition to life. Television cameras captured her emotional reaction to seeing the coronation dress again after 60 years. Lady Patricia shared memories that weren't recorded in any official history. She remembered the Queen's nervousness during dress rehearsals and the relief everyone felt when the actual ceremony proceeded smoothly. Her stories added personal dimensions to the grand historical narrative, showing the young woman behind the crown. The media response exceeded all expectations. Within hours, news outlets worldwide were featuring stories about the exhibition. Social media buzzed with images and comments from journalists who had attended the preview. Margaret watched in amazement as #Coronation Exhibition began trending globally on Twitter. By mid-morning, the Palace Ticket Office reported that all available time slots for the next month had been completely booked. The exhibition's popularity had surpassed every projection, forcing the royal household to consider extending its planned 6-month run. Margaret felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of managing such unprecedented public interest. The first public visitors entered the picture gallery at exactly 10 o'clock. Margaret watched nervously as families, tourists, and royal enthusiasts began their journey through 60 years of history. The audio guides, available in 8 languages, provided detailed commentary on each display section. Early visitors moved slowly through the exhibition, clearly captivated by the intimate glimpse into royal history. Margaret observed their reactions carefully, noting which displays generated the most interest and longest viewing times. The coronation dress consistently drew crowds, but the newly discovered gloves created equally strong emotional responses. Children showed particular fascination with the multimedia presentations. Interactive displays allowed young visitors to explore the Westminster Abbey coronation route and learn about the symbols embroidered on the Queen's dress. Margaret had insisted on making the exhibition accessible to all ages, believing that royal history belonged to everyone. Security staff reported no incidents during the first day, despite the large crowds and intense media attention. Visitors respected the display barriers and followed all photography restrictions. The respectful atmosphere confirmed Margaret's belief that people genuinely wanted to honor the significance of the coronation anniversary. International visitors made up nearly half of the opening day attendance. Tour groups from Japan, Australia, and the United States had specifically planned their London trips around the exhibition dates. Margaret overheard conversations in multiple languages as people shared their own memories of watching the coronation on television or hearing about it from their parents. The gift shop experienced unprecedented demand for exhibition-related merchandise. Special commemorative books, replica jewelry, and postcards featuring the newly discovered gloves sold out within hours. The palace had underestimated public desire for tangible connections to the royal history being celebrated. By afternoon, Margaret realized that the exhibition had achieved something beyond her original goals. Rather than simply displaying historical artifacts, she had created an experience that allowed people to connect emotionally with a pivotal moment in British history. Visitors left the gallery with deeper understanding of the monarchy's role and the young woman who had accepted such enormous responsibilities. Television coverage throughout the day featured interviews with visitors sharing their personal connections to the coronation. Many older attendees remembered watching the ceremony as children, while younger visitors expressed surprise at learning details they had never known. The exhibition was educating as well as commemorating. Margaret's phone buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues at other museums around the world. Curators praised her innovative approach to royal history presentation and requested advice for their own projects. The success was transforming her from a promising young professional into a recognized expert in her field. As evening approached, Margaret reflected on the day's extraordinary success. The combination of meticulous historical research, innovative display techniques, and compelling storytelling had created an exhibition that resonated with audiences far beyond traditional royal enthusiasts. The Queen's personal endorsement had provided credibility, but the public response proved the exhibition's broader appeal. The day's visitor feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Comment cards praised the exhibition's accessibility, historical accuracy, and emotional impact. Many people requested information about upcoming royal exhibitions, suggesting that public appetite for this type of historical presentation had been significantly underestimated. James tallied the day's statistics with obvious satisfaction. Over 2,000 people had visited the exhibition on opening day, setting a new record for single-day Palace Gallery attendance. Advanced bookings suggested that this level of interest would continue throughout the exhibition's run. Local news coverage featured interviews with London residents who had waited in line for hours to experience the exhibition. Their enthusiasm and detailed knowledge of royal history impressed Margaret and validated her decision to include comprehensive educational materials alongside the spectacular artifacts. The success of opening day established the exhibition as a major cultural event rather than simply a museum display. Margaret realized that she had created something that would be remembered long after the anniversary year ended. The combination of newly discovered artifacts, personal stories, and innovative presentation had struck a perfect balance between historical education and emotional engagement. As the gallery closed for the day, Margaret felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The months of research, planning, and careful preparation had culminated in an opening day that exceeded every hope and expectation. Tomorrow would bring new visitors and continued media attention, but the foundation for long-term success had been firmly established. 3 weeks after the exhibition's triumphant opening, Margaret found herself dealing with challenges she had never anticipated. The overwhelming success had created problems as wonderful as they were complex. Ticket demand had forced the palace to extend operating hours and implement a reservation system that was booking visitors 6 weeks in advance. Margaret's days now began at 6 in the morning and often extended past 10 at night. She had become the public face of the exhibition, fielding interview requests from international media while managing the daily operations of hosting thousands of visitors. The young curator, who had once worked in anonymity, was now recognized on London streets. The most significant development came when the palace announced that several foreign museums had requested to host traveling versions of the exhibition. The Smithsonian in Washington, the National Gallery of Australia in Canberra, and the Canadian Museum of History in Ottawa had all submitted formal proposals to display the coronation artifacts in their countries. Creating traveling versions presented unprecedented logistical challenges. Many items in the exhibition had never left British soil, requiring extensive insurance negotiations and security protocols. Margaret worked with international shipping specialists to design climate-controlled transport cases that would protect priceless artifacts during transcontinental journeys. The newly discovered gloves had become the exhibition's breakout stars, generating their own media coverage and scholarly interest. Fashion historians from the Victoria and Albert Museum had requested permission to conduct detailed analysis of the silk and stitching techniques. Their research would contribute to a comprehensive study of royal coronation fashion across centuries. Margaret received an unexpected visit from Professor Elizabeth Harrington, Britain's leading expert on 20th century royal history. Professor Harrington had traveled from Oxford specifically to examine the exhibition's historical accuracy and research methodology. Her endorsement would carry significant weight in academic circles. Walking through the gallery together, Professor Harrington praised Margaret's integration of personal stories with official historical records. The exhibition successfully balanced scholarly rigor with public accessibility, creating an educational experience that engaged both experts and casual visitors. Her positive review would later appear in the Journal of British Historical Studies. The success attracted attention from unexpected quarters. The Archbishop of Canterbury requested a private viewing, particularly interested in the religious artifacts and ceremonial elements from the coronation service. His visit reminded Margaret that the exhibition documented not just royal history, but also significant moments in the Church of England's tradition. International visitors continued arriving in unprecedented numbers. Margaret observed Japanese tourists studying the embroidered Commonwealth symbols on the coronation dress, while American families spent extended time with the interactive displays showing television coverage from 1953. The exhibition was clearly resonating across cultural boundaries. School groups became regular visitors, with teachers using the exhibition as a starting point for lessons about post-war Britain, constitutional monarchy, and social change. Margaret developed special educational materials that connected coronation history to broader themes of leadership, responsibility, and national identity. One memorable afternoon brought a visit from Mrs. Dorothy Chun, a 90-year-old woman who had been a seamstress working on the coronation dress in 1953. Accompanied by her granddaughter, she identified specific sections of embroidery that she had personally completed 70 years earlier. Margaret arranged for her comments to be recorded for the exhibition's archive. Mrs. Chin's memories provided insights that no official record had captured. She remembered the pressure of working to impossible deadlines and the pride felt by everyone involved in creating the dress. Her stories about long days and careful stitching brought human dimensions to what could have been simply an elegant historical artifact. The exhibition's popularity had also attracted criticism from unexpected sources. Some Republican groups argued that celebrating royal history was inappropriate during a period of economic difficulty for many British families. Margaret found herself defending the exhibition's educational value while avoiding political discussions about monarchy's role in modern society. Media attention intensified when several celebrities visited the exhibition. Pictures of famous actors and musicians viewing the coronation artifacts appeared in gossip magazines alongside serious historical commentary. Margaret worried that celebrity coverage might overshadow the exhibition's educational mission, but palace officials assured her that any publicity increased public interest in royal history. The most challenging visitor was Professor James Whitfield, a controversial historian known for challenging official royal narratives. He spent several hours examining every display, taking extensive notes and photographing details. Margaret accompanied him throughout his visit, prepared to defend her research and source materials. Professor Whitfield's subsequent review surprised everyone by praising the exhibition's balanced approach to royal history. He particularly appreciated Margaret's inclusion of different perspectives on the coronation's significance and her acknowledgement of contemporary criticisms alongside the celebration. His endorsement helped establish the exhibition's credibility among academic skeptics. Technical problems began emerging as the exhibition entered its second month. The high volume of visitors was causing wear on interactive displays and climate control systems. Margaret worked with conservation specialists to implement maintenance schedules that wouldn't disrupt public access while protecting irreplaceable artifacts. The palace conservation team became increasingly concerned about prolonged exposure of delicate items to gallery lighting and visitor proximity. Margaret negotiated rotation schedules that would occasionally substitute high-quality replicas for the most fragile original pieces, ensuring long-term preservation while maintaining visitor experience quality. International loan requests presented moral dilemmas alongside practical challenges. Should British royal artifacts travel to countries that had gained independence from the Commonwealth? Margaret found herself consulting with diplomats and cultural attaches to navigate sensitive political considerations while honoring legitimate scholarly interest. The exhibition's success had transformed Margaret's career prospects dramatically. Job offers arrived from major museums worldwide, including positions that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. The young curator who had been unknown outside palace walls was now being recruited by institutions across Europe and North America. Despite external pressures, Margaret remained focused on the exhibition's daily operations and visitor experience. She continued conducting personal tours for special guests while managing media requests and planning potential traveling versions. Her dedication to the project's success impressed both palace officials and museum colleagues. Evening visits became particularly popular as extended hours allowed working people to experience the exhibition after normal tourist crowds had departed. Margaret often stayed late to observe these visitors, noting how different audiences engage with royal history when given adequate time and space for contemplation. The approaching Christmas season brought requests to extend the exhibition's run beyond its originally planned 6 months. Public demand remained strong, and advance bookings suggested continued interest well into the following year. Margaret began planning seasonal editions that would refresh the display while maintaining its core historical narrative. As December approached, Margaret reflected on how completely the exhibition had transformed her professional and personal life. The shy curator who had worried about the Queen's approval had become a confident public speaker and internationally recognized expert. The success felt both exhilarating and overwhelming. The exhibition's impact extended far beyond visitor numbers and media coverage. It had sparked renewed interest in British royal history among younger generations and demonstrated that museum displays could successfully combine entertainment with serious educational content. Margaret's innovative approach was being studied and emulated by curators worldwide. The challenges of success continued growing more complex, but Margaret approached them with confidence gained from navigating the exhibition's early months. The foundation of careful research and authentic storytelling had proven strong enough to support unprecedented public interest and international attention. 6 months after opening day, Margaret stood in the picture gallery, surrounded by empty display cases and carefully wrapped artifacts being prepared for storage. The exhibition's official closing had arrived, but its impact would continue reverberating through her life and career for years to come. The final day had drawn record crowds, with visitors queuing for hours to experience the coronation celebration one last time. The statistics were remarkable by any measure. Over 400,000 people had visited the exhibition during its extended run, making it the most popular royal display in Buckingham Palace history. Visitors had come from 87 countries, with some planning entire vacations around seeing the coronation artifacts. The guest book contained comments in dozens of languages, all expressing gratitude for the opportunity to connect with this pivotal moment in royal history. Margaret's personal transformation had been as dramatic as the exhibition's success. The quiet curator who had once worried about her qualifications was now fielding job offers from prestigious museums worldwide. The Victoria and Albert Museum had offered her the position of chief curator of royal collections, while the Smithsonian was proposing an entirely new department focused on international royal history. The closing ceremony brought together many of the people who had made the exhibition possible. Lady Patricia Williams, now a close friend and frequent advisor, attended alongside other coronation participants who had shared their memories during the planning process. Their stories had transformed static historical artifacts into living testimonies of a remarkable day. James, who had been promoted to assistant curator based on his exhibition work, was already planning their next project together. The success had opened doors for ambitious new displays that would explore different aspects of royal history. The palace administration had committed to supporting innovative exhibitions that could achieve similar public engagement. The Queen made a final private visit on closing day, arriving quietly to examine the displays one last time. Her Majesty expressed particular appreciation for how the exhibition had educated younger generations about constitutional monarchy's role and history. The personal connection she felt to the displayed items was evident in her careful examination of each case. During this final royal visit, the Queen revealed plans for a special honor recognizing Margaret's contribution to preserving and presenting royal history. The announcement of her appointment as a member of the Order of the British Empire would come in the New Year honors list, acknowledging her service to cultural education and historical preservation. The traveling exhibition versions were already being prepared for their international debuts. The Smithsonian installation would open in Washington 6 months later, followed by displays in Ottawa, Canberra, and eventually Tokyo. Margaret would personally oversee each installation, ensuring that the exhibition's educational impact and historical accuracy were maintained across different cultural contexts. Media coverage of the closing focused on the exhibition's broader significance beyond its immediate success. Cultural commentators noted how it had demonstrated public hunger for authentic historical experiences in an increasingly digital world. The combination of genuine artifacts, personal stories, and innovative presentation had created a template for future museum exhibitions. The newly discovered gloves had become the subject of ongoing scholarly research. Fashion historians were using advanced imaging techniques to analyze the silk weaving patterns and compare them to other royal garments from the same period. Their findings would contribute to a comprehensive catalog of coronation fashion that Margaret was preparing for publication. Margaret's forthcoming book, tentatively titled Crowning Glory, The Hidden Stories of Elizabeth II's Coronation, had already attracted interest from publishers in multiple countries. The combination of newly discovered artifacts, personal interviews, and behind-the-scenes exhibition stories would provide readers with unprecedented access to royal history. The conservation challenges had provided valuable lessons for future exhibitions. Margaret worked with preservation specialists to develop new protocols for displaying delicate historical textiles and ensuring their long-term survival. These techniques would influence how museums worldwide approached similar conservation challenges. Educational impact extended far beyond the exhibition's walls. Schools across Britain had incorporated coronation history into their curricula, using exhibition materials to teach about post-war social change, constitutional development, and cultural identity. The display had successfully connected historical events to contemporary educational goals. The economic impact on London tourism had been substantial. Hotels reported increased bookings from visitors specifically planning trips around the exhibition, while local restaurants and shops benefited from the enhanced foot traffic around Buckingham Palace. The success demonstrated how cultural events could contribute to broader economic development. International diplomatic benefits emerged as foreign dignitaries used exhibition visits as occasions for informal discussions with British officials. The displays provided neutral ground for conversations that strengthened cultural and political relationships between Britain and Commonwealth countries. Margaret's colleagues from other museums had regularly visited to study the exhibition's innovative techniques. The integration of multimedia elements with traditional displays was being adopted by institutions worldwide, establishing new standards for historical presentation. Margaret found herself invited to speak at international conferences about museum innovation and public engagement. The archive created during exhibition preparation had become a valuable resource for future researchers. Margaret's interviews with coronation participants, along with high-resolution photographs of every artifact, would serve historians for generations. The documentation process had been as important as the public display. Personal relationships formed during the exhibition planning continued flourishing. Margaret maintained regular correspondence with Lady Patricia Williams and other historical witnesses who had become friends as well as sources. Their ongoing conversations continued revealing new insights into royal history and contemporary social conditions. The success had also created opportunities for Margaret's family. Her grandmother, who had inspired her love of royal history, was invited to a special reception at Buckingham Palace. Seeing her granddaughter honored for preserving the history they had discussed for years brought their relationship full circle. As Margaret supervised the careful packing of the coronation dress, She reflected on how the exhibition had exceeded every possible expectation. What began as a professional assignment had become a transformative experience that established her reputation while serving the public interest in understanding their constitutional heritage. The empty gallery would soon be prepared for its next exhibition, but the impact of the Coronation Anniversary display would continue through traveling versions, scholarly publications, and educational programs. Margaret had successfully created something that would influence how royal history was presented and understood for years to come. The final visitor comment card, written by a 10-year-old girl, read simply, "I want to be a queen when I grow up because queens help people and wear beautiful dresses." Margaret smiled, realizing that the exhibition had achieved its most important goal of inspiring new generations to appreciate both the pageantry and responsibility of constitutional monarchy. As the palace gates closed behind the last visitors, Margaret felt profound satisfaction at having honored the significance of Queen Elizabeth's coronation while creating new understanding of its historical importance. The exhibition had successfully bridged the gap between past and present, making 60-year-old events relevant to contemporary audiences. The future held exciting possibilities as Margaret prepared to expand her work internationally while remaining connected to the British royal collections that had launched her career. The success of the Coronation exhibition had established her as a trusted guardian of royal history and an innovator in museum presentation. Standing alone in the empty gallery, Margaret remembered her grandmother's stories about watching the coronation on television and felt grateful for the opportunity to help preserve those memories for future generations. The exhibition had achieved its ultimate purpose of making history live again through the power of authentic artifacts and compelling storytelling.